Welcome to the Black Rifle Coffee Podcast. I'm your host today with Kevin Reeves, and our guest is a good buddy of mine named Bret Vorhees from Taurus. He's the CEO. He became CEO at age 32, which is the youngest CEO in the history of the firearms industry, modern firearms industry.
Maybe, yeah, probably.
And you're here, you're from Oregon, and we're going to have some conversations about all kinds of good stuff.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad you can make it. So, where'd you grow up?
Whoa.
Oh,
How do you
here we
take
go.
your coffee?
Oh, generally almost completely black, just a little splash of oat milk or something in there, but pretty strong generally.
How did you like the espresso pour that you had from our CEO, Evan Hafer?
I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it. It was fantastic, but I don't know if that's good enough. I'm trying to figure out how I can replicate that without investing in all that expensive equipment that he had in there. But certainly my Nespresso machine that's in my office at work, it won't do that. So it was great. It was fantastic.
We could rectify that. Maybe we could help you with that, so you could have magic in your mouth in the morning.
Yeah, we'll get you some coffee kits and stuff and pour over and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's good.
For sure.
It's real good.
Yeah, it's the Director Geisha, and it's fantastic. Like, I don't normally think that espresso tastes good. This actually is really, really good.
I have not had an espresso that tasted like that at all.
It's fantastic. So, all right, where'd you grow up?
I grew up on the West Coast, born in California, but very quickly moved to Oregon. Grew up there almost my entire life until my kind of career got rolling, and then I kind of took a jump and moved. But, yeah, I grew up outside of Portland, went to high school, went to college there, University of Oregon, started my career in the firearm industry there. Yeah, kind of grew up hunting and fishing out there and all the great stuff that state does offer.
So, and you wrestled and played football in high school.
Played football in high school.
And you were going to wrestle at Oregon.
Had some ambition to wrestle at Oregon. I had a invite to walk on, which basically meant go to practice and get my ass kicked by
Preferred walk-on status. Very familiar with that.
Yeah. So, yeah, my freshman year, the wrestling program got cut at Oregon. But I had the opportunity to go to a couple practices. We actually had a national champion, Shane Webster, at my weight, which was 184. So I had zero chance of ever actually competing. But, yeah, after a couple practices and things like that, it's like the program's not even going to be here. It's not worth it. So we just focused on school and beer and girls.
So I played football in college my first 2 years, and I learned, like you, on the third day at practice that my best years were behind me, and I had reached my peak, and we were on the downslide. Day 3. I learned how good I wasn't.
Yeah.
It was like it's an eye-opener, like, because you're like, oh, man, like, I'm good. And then you get – you're working with great athletes, and you're like, okay, so I get it, okay, all right, yeah.
Well, some of them are built different. So I went to a wrestling camp at the Tar Heels house in North Carolina, and you're just sweating, and you're not in your singlet or anything else.
Yeah.
A guy in my same weight class I tie up with, and his arms are twice the size
Just
of mine,
rocked
but they're
up,
in long sleeves.
Yeah,
you couldn't see them. Like,
see,
okay.
Yeah, and I was always kind of taller and lankier. I was real slim growing up. I think my freshman year of high school, I was like 140 weight class. I'm the same height, 6'2". So it's like no muscle. And then I kind of worked up. And by the time I got out of football senior year, I was probably like 215. And, it's probably boring to talk about, but cut a lot of weight down to like 171, but was very, very trimmed up at that weight.
What were you going to wrestle at in college your freshman year?
184.
184.
Yeah, which is a very difficult weight class, too. 184, 197, those are real grown-ups.
Yeah, strong men.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. That's like Nick Palmisano wrestled at West Point, and he's like best buds with Tim Kennedy, and he's like, like talking about like good to great, and he's like, I was a collegiate wrestler, and he's like, I was good. He's like, Tim Kennedy ragdolls me, just throws me all over the place, just hammers him.
Yeah.
So, all right, so you're in college. You had aspirations to join in the military.
I did. Post-college, I did. I had an event that happened where my best friend growing up was actually he died from getting blown up in Afghanistan. He actually made it back, but so it's kind of an emotional time, and I was at kind of a weird spot where I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I kind of had aspirations of joining, and in Portland they had the Air Guard kind of AFSOC teams there with combat controllers and PJs, as you know. And so I kind of had some aspirations to do that for a little while. went through some testing, and it was kind of like, all right, well, we'll call you when spots open up. And at the same time, I'm working. I think I was at Crimson Trace at the time, and ended up leaving to go to Loophole, and career started kind of taking off, and also started dating my now wife. So it was like, all right, I got to make some decisions on what I truly want to do. And I think in those units there, I don't think people leave very often. I think it's pretty long tenured people that stick around. So
I could shed some light on that.
Yeah,
So that's the 125th STS where I'm a PJ, and we'll field new guys. But then based on the pipeline and the requirement and seats at the unit, some guys sit for a long time. A buddy of mine,
waited,
especially
3 years or something like that?
it wasn't that long. No, it was like maybe a year that I toyed around with the idea.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, even a buddy of mine, he wanted to sign up to do, be a controller, and based on COVID, which is an extreme circumstance, but they have no projected start date for the next, the pups to put them in the pipeline and get them going.
So it sounds like there's no shortfall in guys wanting to go that career path, like hitting their recruitment goals, because you hear a lot in today's day and age, like I think the U.S. Army is going to miss their recruiting quota by 15%, which will be the first time in maybe ever, something like that. And then I know that the SEALs have like a 10-year backlog of guys because their marketing campaign is so amazing.
Well, the thing I'm most curious about is, yes, you're correct, but those are big name like Army Ranger, SF, whatever. How did you find out about controllers, and more specifically the 125th? Because nobody knows about it.
I don't. And
Yeah, I was looking for like what's life after. If I were to go in the military, what would life after be? And like I said, I was very confused on what I wanted to do for a living at this point. I went to school to be an accountant. I knew I didn't want to be an accountant, but that's what my degree was in. I was technically an accounting intern at Crimson Trace for like 3.5 years. I was doing all sorts of other stuff, working with the engineering team and sales team and stuff, but I had no clue what I truly wanted to be. And I just kind of stumbled into like what a combat controller was, and like learning the difference between a JTAC and combat controller. Seemed like a really interesting job that, for whatever reason, I thought maybe I'd want to be an air traffic controller after something like that. I don't know why I would think that, but I was like 22 and stupid, I guess.
Were you good at accounting?
Yes.
That actually makes sense to me, because the tech side of what the controllers can do and the way that they can prioritize and organize like multiple layers of aircraft, it's a talent.
Yeah.
And I think that those things, that analytical kind of organized thought process, would be super advantageous.
so what skills do you have?
None.
That CCTs have?
Oh, what do you mean? As a PJ?
No, but I mean like as a PJ
Probably
versus
jumping
a
out of planes and
CCT.
shooting.
It's all the hard skills. We share hard skills, but in reality, they're based on it's all radio. It's all comms. When there's a lot more to it, surveying DZs and what kind of birds can I bring into this. When it's unsurveyed, you have to go in, and they have a whole algorithm on how to make those decisions. Whereas a PJ we have cool ways to get places to do medicine.
So your primary focus is, would you say, medical versus a CCT, which is calling in
dropping bombs.
Yep. Which pipeline's harder?
Okay, so this is I'm gonna breeze past this really quick, but it used to be a combined in-doc. So your first 10 weeks, if he's a controller and I'm a J, we do all the same pool shit. In my opinion, the requirement for controllers to have as much water work is not as necessary, because depending on if you go to an STS or if you go to a rescue as a PJ, you have to be able to jump in the ocean and grab somebody, right, and get them out. So you have to be tortured, so you be comfortable. Whereas the controllers, that's not a thing. They might be attached to an ODA that happens to be a dive team, which is like not many of them, and they need to be versed in dive in order to do an OTB.
So they would also go to like combat dive school at some point and do more schooling after.
For sure. Well, we would all do the same pipeline. So basically get all the same schools, but then I get medical training at the end, and they get, I don't remember what it's called, but all their radio and DZ stuff.
But both pipelines sound pretty damn hard.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the attrition rates are still really high. My INDOC class, which was, I think we started 80-something, graduated like 10 or 11 just from INDOC. And then you lose a couple along the pipeline. But
So you can't be stupid and do these jobs. You can be bullheaded, but like there has to be a functioning brain that can digest information.
100%. But the pipeline has changed. And again, I don't understand completely how it works. But if we all go into, we want to do Air Force Special Operations. You want to be a PJ. You want to be a controller. I want to be a weather guy, which I don't understand weather guys. However, I think it's now like an aptitude test, right? So you start together to get kicked in the nuts, but then you're better at air. You have a propensity for medical, and I'm whatever. So then you get placed in those respective. There was a big change a couple of years ago, and to be honest, I'm old and I don't really track it. I just hear the young guys like talking about it, and that's kind of.
All right, so you were an accountant at Crimson Trace, but you kind of mission crept into some engineering and design work.
Yeah, I didn't do the design. I was like, this is actually where I kind of got into shooting pistols for the first real experience. I was like, hey, you want to go? The engineers would pull me and say, hey, you want to go help us do torture testing on some products? And so a lot of that was like new guns that were not out to the market yet. So I thought that was like really cool and interesting and fun. And so I just kind of would go to the range with them in my spare time when I wasn't working on projects. And so I started learning, the testing procedures they were doing, what they were trying to like push the products to failure and those type of things. And then at the same time was like working with the sales and marketing team on some project stuff. And so it's just kind of well-rounded experience for, at the time, this was 08, 09, 2010, Crimson Trace was like, market leader in the accessory segment of our industry. So, it was just kind of a cool experience, cool company culture, stuff like that. But just kind of, outgrew really my role there because it wasn't well defined. And so I ended up leaving and going to Loophole after 3.5 years.
What year did you start at Loophole?
2012.
Okay. So was Bruce the CEO?
No, Bruce was not there yet.
Okay.
I had a great kind of mentor there and ended up being a great friend of mine, Gabe Lang. He was my boss, and he kind of recognized that I was understanding the process, and he was really good at teaching it. He was willing to give me probably more responsibility than my experience warranted, and he was kind of pushing me to like, okay, how much can you handle responsibility-wise? And I ended up developing great relationships with all of our customers and, learning the sales process at a young age instead of like, a lot of people learn it as a rep where you're beating down doors and, traveling miles. I was on the inside part of the business managing the sales teams with, other people that were other sales managers and stuff like that. But just kind of clung on to that kind of quick because it was also analytical work, and that's something that I kind of have a propensity to do well. And like pretty quick there, I was approached for a pretty big step up in my career, and it required me moving to Arkansas, and so I became
for Loophole?
Yeah. Well, no, not for Loophole. So I ended up leaving Loophole after a couple of years, and I ended up taking on the sales management role at Walther.
Okay. And Walther's in Arkansas?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that. So how long were you at Loophole?
Like 2 years.
Okay, and then you went to Walther?
Yeah.
And you were at Walther for
7.
Okay, what was your first job at Walther?
It's like national sales manager.
How old were you at the time?
25, I think.
That's pretty young for that job, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
So tell us about your time at Walther.
Real quick, you didn't happen to go to the Crimson Trace shoot in Bend that they put on in like 2009, did you?
I think I did, yeah.
I was there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was shooting against.
Like the night shoot stuff.
Yeah, I was shooting against like Lena Mikulik when she was 12, and she was wrecking everybody.
She's awesome.
Yeah, she's great.
God, she's great. Her dad's good.
Yeah, that's funny.
That.
So let's talk about your time at Walther.
Yeah, Walther was a great experience. Again, having leadership that was willing to give me a lot of responsibility. It was a much leaner team. We had a big staff at Loophole, and it's a big company in general. Walther's a little smaller. We didn't have a lot of staff. When I was on board there, it was me, a marketing guy, and then a vice president who ended up leaving the company after a few years and kind of opened doors for me to step up and grow within that company.
Were you asking for advancement, or were they just did they identify talent in you and like, hey, this guy's he's a horse?
So the CEO, I was very close with the CEO there, and the people in Germany. And when the VP left the company, we just had real open, honest conversations of, okay, where do you want to be? Where do you see yourself? He's asking me these things. And he was really open to like trying to find a path for me to do that, to the point where we actually talked about him mentoring me to take over as CEO at some point there. We didn't put a timeline on that, but just over the years, I started to take on more product development responsibilities. I'm not a marketing guy, but we hired some marketing people and I helped manage them at some point. So it was kind of my first real experience in marketing management.
Was the goal to like become a CEO of a firearms company? I mean, like you don't seem like you're ambitious, but like your ambition seems like it's well guided and well placed.
Yeah, I don't know that I ever said one day I'm going to be the CEO. I thought at Walther like, hey, there's a path, but I know that I want to develop in a lot of areas, and I also enjoyed like what I was doing. I was running the product development stuff. I was in Germany almost once a month. Working with engineers, testing, coming out with all this new product that was getting like kind of recognized in the industry as, being kind of industry leading.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a ton of fun with that. I was hunting in Germany every time I was there. I was shooting, 44,000 rounds in 2 days, doing testing. Like,
oh wow,
sounds miserable.
It kind of is, but it's also like super fun because it was like there were long days. But you're going to go have some beer and dinner, and then you're going to go hunt until midnight, and then you're going to get up the next day and do it again at 6 a.m. And like it's running pretty hard, but it's like super fun for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your hands hurt after that, but
right.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So your time at Walther, like what were some of the things that you worked on? Like what were some of the improvements in the company? Because I have a feeling that if you look at your timeline and your biological passport at these different brands, like everything was better when you left.
Yeah, I think so. So at Walther, we had some kind of innovative products. The first was they had a great platform that was already developed in the PPQ line.
What's that?
It's basically a striker fired polymer frame pistol.
Okay.
And it's a great gun, great trigger, great ergonomics, very reliable, very accurate, everything you could kind of want. It didn't fit some of the trends in the industry like optic ready pistols, so they didn't have a good solution for that. There was a lot of aftermarket accessorizing, customization type stuff. We didn't have any of that. So that was kind of the first things that we tackled and that I worked on hard to like shore up is, okay, we got to have optic ready pistols. We got to have accessory lines, whether we're building them or other people are building them. We ended up accomplishing both of those. And then, I kind of used companies like Zev Technologies as an example. Like, hey, people are taking a Glock and they're going to go spend $1,500 on a new slide, a new barrel, grip work, a new trigger, all this stuff. We can provide that out of the box from the factory, tested, warranted by the factory for $800. So I developed with the engineers there the Q5 Match, which was a kind of a competition-ready pistol, but it was like the first optic-ready pistol that Walther put out.
I saw it. That was about 2015, 16?
Yep, correct.
Yeah, so one of the guys at work, because again, people purchase things and you check them out, and guys do racing or 3-gun on the side. Mm-hmm. He opened the box. He was like, oh, I've got a Walther. I'm going to race with it. I was like, what are you talking about, man? Because it wasn't. You guys didn't have a product like that. He opened it up, and it had the kind of blue, right?
Yeah, it had a blue trigger in it, which was more aesthetic. We actually did some improvements on the gun and then introduced them with that gun and then kind of trickled down to the rest of the line.
Well, it had like a comp and then a trigger and whatnot.
Some slide work, stuff like that.
I ran it on the range. I'm like, this thing's fucking rad.
Yeah,
I was impressed with it.
It shoots really good. So we took that, the same meeting that I pitched that concept to the board, I was pulled aside by one of the engineers and he had a little briefcase and he's like, hey, what do you think of this? And I opened up and it was like a really modernized striker-fired steel frame gun, mm-hmm. which did not exist at the time. I'm like, that's really cool. I'm like, the gun that I just talked about in there, could you do that in a steel frame? And he's like, yeah, and we can sell it in Europe. They were always like, they focused on the U.S. market, but they also wanted to serve their own markets over there. And so he's like, yeah, and I think we can sell that in Europe. And then he just like went to work. So we came out the Q5 steel frame very shortly after that, which was, a $1,500 striker-fired gun, not cheap. And
so what does striker fire mean?
basically, like these pistols right here are striker fired. So what that means is when you actuate the trigger, when you pull the trigger, it is tripping a sear, and inside of the slide there's a rod that basically acts as a firing pin. It's called a striker. But instead of like a hammer on a 1911 hitting the firing pin, it's held back by a spring, and it sits on that sear. So as you pull the trigger, it will drop the sear. It will disengage the safeties that are in the slide. It will drop the sear, and that striker will release forward with the basically same energy that a hammer would hit the firing pin. So it acts the same way, but you have a very different trigger pull. Instead of having a 1911 where it's just like a very short, crisp wall, or a double action pull where it's really long and heavy, it's a very different trigger pull where you have a little take up and then you hit a wall and it will release that strike.
I think a great example is like the Ruger P89. You remember that gun?
Yeah.
It was a Desperado gun. So it would be racked to the rear, right? And then you'd have to decock it. So your first trigger pull in a combat situation, like the Beretta actually also, super long, super heavy. And then once the slide runs, the hammer's to the rear. Now you've got a lighter trigger pull. So you've got two different things. Who came out with the first striker fire?
It wasn't Glock. So there's been striker fire guns going way back.
Yeah.
I mean, Walther made some in the early 1900s, actually.
I mean, but Glock became super prolific, and then
Yeah.
a lot more people started doing it because it's a consistent trigger pull, and there's no exterior mechanism like hammer, decocker, all these extra steps. So now it's the industry standard for that.
And for competition, it kind of makes a lot of sense because people want a heavier weight. The gun doesn't recoil as much, but with what you only had options with were hammer-fired guns, and the competition rules state if it's a double-action, single-action gun, that first trigger pull has to be long and heavy. Mm-hmm. You can't shoot it off a single action out of the holster. So a striker fire, it's a consistent pull every single time. You don't have that different pull, with a few exceptions of guns that we probably won't get into. But in general, like a Glock, a Walther, these guns here, they're all going to have that consistent trigger pull.
Well, and I think the benefit, we kind of glazed over, but the steel frame is recoil. I mean, that makes a huge difference. Back in the day, we'd put tungsten guide rods and whatnot in our issued Glocks just to put more weight on the gun to keep the muzzle flip down for follow-up sight packages and tighter groups. Yeah. So to have a steel frame, people are like, well, why the fuck? Because everything's polymer. It's advantageous for that reason.
So steel frame would be more accurate? Or
not accurate. It would manage the recoil better based on the weight. Okay. And as long as you manage the recoil and all the other fundamentals, you would be able to run the gun a little faster.
You can shoot it faster because your return to your target's faster. The gun's going to settle back in without recoil
muzzle flip or whatever.
High muzzle flip.
Yeah. All right. Gotcha.
Yeah. So back to, I guess, Walther. So we did the series of steel frame guns. They were very successful. Did some concealed carry guns that, at the same time, I think the 365 was coming out, and they were kind of ahead of what we were. These were single stack guns, well regarded, but once these micro compacts came out with the higher capacities, it kind of, it put a dent in that market quite a bit. But the big thing that we worked on that for me was Walther launched it after I left, but it was my project that I'm probably most proud of. I was working hand in hand with some agencies, specifically the Secret Service, and we basically wrote a spec sheet down based on a gun that they were wanting to buy in the near future, and I believe that we nailed that, and that's the Walther PDP. So we improved a lot of things from what the PPQ previously offered. Basically, every aspect of the gun is improved in some way, and so we were able to write that and start to get it into hands of law enforcement in the U.S., which was something Walther always struggled to do. Getting people off of a Glock and trying to convince a whole agency to switch is very difficult. Ironically, when we were getting ready to launch it, or when Walther was, Secret Service actually had a lot of turnover at the director level, and so they had a new director that came in and he basically said, I'm not dealing with the pistol solicitation, buy it off the Homeland contract, and they bought Glocks. So it wasn't what they wanted, but they ended up going with the Glocks, and Walther came out with a great gun that has been recognized pretty well.
Are there agencies that carry anything other than Glock, or services, or what are some of the guns that different services and agencies carry?
The SIG 320 is probably the secondary. Glock still is the market leader. But the SIG 320, we got a couple of big agencies on with Walther when I was there. Big one down in Florida that's pretty prominent. And then, Smith probably still has some contracts for the M&P out there.
Okay.
Yeah, I always, think about the military. I went from Beretta to Glock, basically, but, like, SEAL teams always had, I think it was the 226, the SIG.
Yeah.
And then that's evolved to, like, the 320. And then, actually, the Air Force folks, I was driving to the base the other day. They've got some Coyote SIG thing that they're rocking now. Yeah.
M17.
Which is weird because I'm not a huge Glock fan by any means, but it's almost like everybody just did what the guy before them did. And we're like, oh, we got to have Glocks. I'm like, it's not the greatest gun. To me, I'm not a huge fan.
They don't fit my hand well. I don't like.
It's the palm swell and the angle. The angles, every time you point it, if you know what you're doing, you're going to have to heel up onto sights a lot of times. And a lot of companies fixed it. They made a different angle, which was a more easier pointing, natural pointing gun, more like the 1911, which is, fairly straight up backstrap. But I don't know. That's always the thing. People are like, well, I'm buying my first gun. I'm going to get a Glock. I go, why? I wouldn't buy one. And I slung guns professionally for over 20 years. I would not walk in and purchase.
What did you carry as a sidearm?
I carried a Glock only because I had to.
Okay.
But when I went home, I bought, I think my first non-Glock that I purchased was an M&P. Because that palm swell was adjustable. It was pretty ergonomic. Yep. My personal Glocks, I had the palm swells built out to change the angle so that it would work. And then I kept the stock one only so I could train for work. When I go to the range, I'm shooting the same shit that I'm going to be shooting overseas. But then we went to the 43, 19, 17, 18. We had all the shits.
Do you have any Glocks?
Yeah, I have.
You don't like them?
I don't shoot them well, I'll tell you that.
Really?
But I've had so much trigger time behind the PPQ and PDP platform, and then now these. I stick to what I shoot most, and if I picked up a Glock, I'm not going to run it very well.
Really?
Well, that's amazing too, because the Glock has never addressed, at least to my knowledge, and I haven't put my hands on the new stuff, but their trigger is triangular. So if you don't seat it correctly, you're either pushing or you're pulling on it. Whereas, like, I drive fire this thing and it's flat in the front, which takes away
straight pull back.
Yeah, it's great. Flat in the front is the way it should be, which means I switched all the triggers on my guns if they weren't. So they built into the actual mechanics of the gun something that can affect your trigger squeeze, and they've never fixed it. It's still the same shit.
Okay. So when you were at Walther, did you guys have any screw ups?
Yeah, for sure.
Can you talk about any of this?
Yeah, we had so Walther is generally let's say a premium line of guns. They have some cheaper options, and like rimfire stuff. Certainly not duty grade pistols, but then they have really high end, some of the best duty pistols out there. And then they have everything up into these small bore Olympic rifles that are $5,000, $6,000, and they're like the world leader in that. So they have this wide range of product that but most of it's pretty premium stuff. But we for whatever reason we continued to chase this price point volume gun, and we had two models that were essentially the same gun. One was reskinned a little bit better, and both of those flopped. They were not good. We ended up fire selling them for losing money on them, whatever, but we kept trying to do that, and we probably should have just taken a step back after the first failure and said that's not who we are. So it's probably the biggest learning experience out of that is know what your brand really is and then play to that. And then we had some concealed carry guns that just were difficult to get to work right. They had some innovative features in them that kind of delayed the recoil inside them. It was like a piston system inside. And when they ran, they were great. The ones that I owned had no malfunctions with, but in general, they were difficult to get that consistent production out of. And so some of those were probably they didn't help Walther grow like we wanted it to. And, sometimes when you have, foreign ownership or just some higher up people that want something, you're going to do what they say.
Black Friday is here, and Black Rifle Coffee Company is kicking off its biggest sale of the year to help you get your holiday shopping done right. Shop 30% off site-wide, including 30% off your first month when you join Black Rifle Coffee Club. Joining the coffee club is a super convenient and customizable way to get your coffee delivered right to your door on whatever schedule works for you. Plus, you can change it whenever you like, free of charge. These Black Friday deals are absolutely insane, with discounts up to 70% off on some products. Head to blackriflecoffee.com and take advantage of these incredible deals on all our best merch, gear, and coffee roast.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I know what that's like. So you were at Walther, what, 7 years?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about leaving Walther and going to Taurus, where you were presently the CEO.
Yeah.
How did, dude, you're 32 years old. I think the process started when you were 31? The interview and
I think I had just turned 32. It was maybe a 7-month interview process, from the first time I was contacted by a recruiter, and then several interviews and.
So you get an email from a recruiter.
Yeah, which that happens a lot.
Yeah.
This one I was like, I don't know if I'm going to reply to this, and kind of talked to my wife about it, and she's like, well, what's the deal with this? I'm like, well, I don't even know what the company is. She's like, well, what does it hurt to find out? And I'm like, well, yeah, I guess you're right. So I just replied to him and said, hey, I'd love to talk, whatever. So I set up a time to talk to him. He still didn't tell me what the company was at that point, but I kind of had some suspicions. There was probably 3 different options on who it could be. I won't say who the other 2 were because I don't know, what happened with those leaders that were in those seats at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was kind of like a confidential thing because there was, already a CEO there that had been with the company for a long time. Taurus had not a revolving door, but a short-term track record of CEOs leaving after about 2 years, whether it's on their own or not. So, it was kind of like a concerning thing. And I didn't really know, what I was really getting myself into. I had an idea, but when I got into the interview process and started meeting the leadership team in Brazil, because I didn't meet with anybody in the U.S.
Explain that in Brazil, what Taurus is.
Yeah, so our parent company is Taurus Armas. It's the same company, although we are like a subsidiary of theirs, right? They own us 100% outright, and they are a publicly traded company down in Brazil. So big company, 3,000 employees. I don't even know how many square feet of manufacturing space, but pretty much every component of the gun we're making in-house or relatively close to all of it in-house. So that's really our benefit as a company. We control our manufacturing processes, we control the costs, don't rely on outside suppliers, and building stuff in Brazil is generally a little bit cheaper than doing it in the U.S. So yeah, there's a leadership team down there. I learned that it had just kind of changed over to a new team in late 2018, I believe, and they had this new vision of kind of turning the company around. And Taurus at the time, and even a little bit today, kind of damaged reputation. Some of it for good reason, So it was like a hey, how do we turn this brand around? Like what can we do? And what they saw in me, I guess, was kind of the innovative thought and product development and things that they thought were because I don't think you're going to get that turnaround from a different marketing campaign. You know what I mean? You have to do things fundamentally different from the manufacturing level, and everyone from the assembly line workers in Brazil, the leadership down there, and everyone in our company here have to be completely bought into that vision. So
yeah, it's like you can have the greatest marketing campaign in the world, and if you send people into a room to look at the product you're marketing and it's a piece of junk,
right,
you're wasting your time versus putting all of your time and energy into creating the best product.
Yeah.
And then you get people in the room, and then those people see this product, they're like, oh, this is amazing. And then from there, they'll go out and tell the world, which is the greatest marketing in the world is referrals.
Right.
People talking about you in a good way,
Right.
So you get a call, you have a phone interview?
Yep. I have a phone interview with the recruiter, and then I fly down to Miami and do in-person interviews with the CEO and CFO down in Brazil. But they came up to Miami to meet.
How was that?
It was interesting. So the global CEO, who I still report to today, does not speak English. So he was, asking me questions. There was translation. It was pretty wild. And and I have experience working with foreign ownership.
Yeah, because Walter was Germany. Yeah.
But the Germans that I worked with every day spoke great English. There was never any real communication issues. So this is a different experience, and Portuguese is a different language altogether.
It's an entertaining language to listen to.
Portuguese.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting experience. Generally liked the people. They were kind of laid back, kind of seemed like fun-loving people. Which, when you're in an interview for that, I thought this is gonna be very serious stuff, and it was. They were asking hard questions and stuff like that, and flat out asked me why do you think you can do this at your age? I'm like,
oh, so they were. I mean, that was a concern of theirs. Not a concern, but it was a topic.
Yeah, I think I don't remember if it was the first interview or the second, but they're like, "How old are you?" And in the U.S., you can't ask, But I'm like, whatever. They don't know, and they're like, "We know that you're not supposed to ask that, but how do you think you can do this at your age?" Mm-hmm. I'm like, well, I don't know. The age has anything to do with it because, how long have you been trying to turn the company around and do this? And how old were the people that tried to do that?
Exactly. Sometimes I think the age is the benefit because you're more innovative in your thinking as opposed to let's.
Historically, in my opinion, the firearms industry is like turning a cargo container ship around in the middle of the ocean. It takes 18 miles because those guys have been in that role for decades, and they're used to doing things a certain way. They don't evolve.
Right.
And I know 10 years ago, you talk to these firearms companies about their social media and stuff. They're like, oh, well, Bobby's stepdaughter, she's always on her phone. She does our Facebook. And it's like, that's the level of attention that you think this warrants. But it's funny, if you look at certain NFL teams, like Tomlin at the Steelers, he took that job over at 34. And then you look at, what's his name? He went to Marist School in Atlanta, the coach of the Rams.
Yeah,
30 years old. And those guys have both won Super Bowls.
Yep.
So that's interesting. So the age thing did come up
several times.
Yeah.
With basically everybody that I interviewed with, they asked about it, which didn't bother me. It is what it is. I knew. Also, when I was interviewing for this, I'm like, I don't have anything to lose. Let's see where this goes, because I honestly wanted to know what they were looking for too.
We'll go through the exercise. It doesn't ever hurt.
I can learn from this, and won't hurt anything if I don't get it. But I tried my best to get it, and so go through those interviews. The first two were down in Florida, in-person interview type things.
From the time that you had that first phone call till the second interview in Miami, how long was that?
Probably a month.
A month, okay.
Yeah, probably a month, and then the second interview was in Orlando, was probably another month and a half after that one.
And then from there you go down to an interview in Brazil?
Yeah, I went down to another interview in Brazil. They had the company's 80th year anniversary party going on. So at the time, the current CEO from the U.S. was there, entertaining riders and customers and all the people that I worked with on a daily basis. So they kind of had me behind the scenes shuffling around, and I didn't know any of this at the time, but it was just kind of a weird thing. All right, we're going to take you to this room. And then I'd just be sitting there for 30 minutes by myself. I'm like, what is this, But I was in Brazil for 12 hours total. It was a fast trip.
Oh, in and out.
Yeah, I got to the factory about noon, and I flew out the very next morning. So it was like in and out fast. But after they kind of wound their festivities kind of winded up, or was done for the day, they actually had time to sit down and actually do an interview with me. So. Yeah.
What is the level of sophistication of those people? Serious businessmen, you know what I mean? Very sophisticated, squared away, put together
very
dudes.
Sharp, sophisticated businessmen. Very heavy resource laden company. So we have investor relations departments. We have, there's over 3,000 employees down there. So it's a full staff.
It's a thing.
Yes.
It's a thing.
Very much so. And then, the folks that are running the ship are, industry veterans. Our CFO is an extremely sharp finance guy. He's worked for some of the biggest companies in the world as a CFO or controller level. So he's got a lot of experience.
So the global CEO is a finance dude.
Yeah.
Okay. It's interesting because, like, when I talk to CEOs and whatnot, and everyone I meet, I compare to Evan.
Yeah.
And, when you look at companies that are, 50, 100, 200, 300, $400 million, it's always finance guys or engineer operations type dudes. And, for being Evan's such a close friend of mine, it's like Evan's a marketing guy,
Mm-hmm.
And he likes to say he's a data guy, but, like, Evan is a marketing guy, And the only other marketing guy that comes to mind is Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs would, if he were alive, he would tell you that he could write code and all this stuff. But, like, Steve Jobs was a marketing dude.
Yeah.
And it's interesting exercise for me to meet these people, and it's like, I've never met a CEO like Evan. It's a totally different animal. So when and Evan's always joking around. I mean, you've met him today, and we were chatting and stuff, and, like, he's kind of a joker. But it's interesting, like, the level of sophistication and, like, what's required. Because, like, when you're growing up and you think of CEOs, you think of these super serious, like, staunch, like, just stoic-faced guys that are just strictly business and they don't smile, tell jokes, and have they ever been happy? Like, versus Evan, who's constantly making everyone laugh. So that's why I asked the question. Like,
yeah. So our CEO, the CFO is a finance guy. Our CEO is a sales and marketing guy.
oh, okay,
So he's got a little different outlook on things. And I will say, like, the Brazilians, for is whatever you want to call them, sophisticated, good business people. They generally are very good business people. They also like to bust each other's balls, like,
Really?
non-stop. And then it kind of bleeds over to our team once we kind of, like, start developing relationships with them and stuff like that. So they are generally more laid back than, like, working with the Germans in a lot of ways, but they take their business very seriously too.
They have the ability to cut up. Like, culturally, they're super entertaining.
Well, you know what I think of when I think of Brazil? Like, so, like, if you were to go grab 11 random people from this office and, like, hey, we're going to go play, some football outside. Like, everyone kind of has an idea of how the game's played because it's, like, a major sport. Versus Brazil, when I think of Brazilians, it's like every one of them knows how to fight, and they're all black belts in BJJ. Like, every single Brazilian in the world is a black belt.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there are, like, there's several people down there that, if you can tell, like, if they're more fit or whatever, and generally they're pretty fit people in general, but a lot of them roll around in their off time.
So there's consequences to making mistakes.
I haven't asked if I can join when I'm down there.
Yeah.
I haven't taken that.
Well, you got the wrestling background. You probably sling around a little bit.
Maybe a little bit. I don't know.
No, you can always tell when you're doing some jiu-jitsu and you grab onto somebody that wrestles. It's like you could feel that explosive kind of power and the strength and stuff. You're like, ooh, I gotta be careful with that
some
dude.
Leverage. And
Yeah, balance points and
how to
whatnot.
control them. So, where in Brazil is the headquarters?
Southern Brazil. So Porto Alegre is the town, or the nearest airport, I guess. We have two factories down there. One is primarily the pistol stuff, and then one is, like, more of a long gun factory. So we make, like, Rossi lever actions and stuff like that.
Okay.
So.
All right. So you go to your meeting down there. What happens next? You come back. You're there 12 hours.
Yeah, come back, and I don't really hear much for like a week and a half, maybe something like that. And but I'm thinking, all right, they flew me down. I saw the receipt for the ticket. It was not cheap. It was business class. Like, they're taking this serious. Like, I have a shot at this. So,
well, hold on. When did you think you had a shot? At what point?
After the second interview.
Okay. And
they said, all right, they told me, like, as we were wrapping up the second interview, you need to come down to Brazil. I want to introduce you to some of the shareholders, stuff like that. So it was basically then I thought, okay, they're serious. And then,
were you aware of any competition at this point? Other people interviewing for the same job?
I still don't know who they interviewed.
But there was somebody.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I know that they interviewed people. I know some of the companies they interviewed people from.
Mm-hmm.
The people that I suspected, they told me it wasn't, but they weren't going to tell me who it was.
Yeah,
so
fair enough.
At this point, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
So, I came back after the trip to Brazil, which was, probably the biggest eye-opening part was seeing the factory and what it truly is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've seen Walther, very impressive machine shop, but a small factory. This is a sprawling operation that, I think I kind of joke, but I don't know if it's really a joke. Like, it looks like it was an old prison where it's this huge campus with, like, 12-foot concrete walls and razor wire, and then all these buildings, but it's like state-of-the-art equipment inside of them. But I think they even have like a soccer field in there. Like, it's huge. And then, recently they just bought this property next to them, so it's getting even bigger. But watching what they were doing from a product standpoint already at that point, like, they had made the decision, hey, we're fixing this. They just needed someone to help in the U.S. side and help guide the product stuff. But I saw that it was very clear that they were already on their path. The investment in quality control, those procedures were all there already.
Was there a detachment from the previous leadership or just the entity and like the shooting sports that, from the States, 3-gun, comp guns? Was there a disconnect there and that's why they weren't as innovative before you showed up?
I think there's a little bit of that. I think having kind of a structured R&D process was lacking. And I think that's where even when Taurus would come out with something that was, let's say, innovative, not talking about like the Curve, something that like people would actually buy and like they got a lot of orders for, they would stumble and they could never deliver. So like even when they did something good, they messed it up. And so there was just like, there were times where they had the opportunity and couldn't pull it off. But I do think like, and I'll talk about like culture and stuff like that here in a minute. I do think that that's a key part of what we're doing is having people that are invested in this stuff outside of work is important.
I guess that was my next question because I don't know. What does the shooting sport industry in Brazil look like versus us?
So sport pistol shooting is becoming a thing, like IPSC style.
Okay.
That's becoming more and more popular. They've never had the access to the gear, holsters, that kind of stuff. Even pistol-wise, like I don't think you could buy a 9mm pistol before 2018 elections.
Okay.
So I think you had to have a 380, and no one's competing in 380, So, like all that's relatively new, but it's growing extremely fast. So yeah, I think they kind of follow our lead on that, but like they're developing it too.
Outstanding. Yeah.
So you come back from Brazil.
Week
and a half goes by.
Yeah, I don't really hear much. And then I get a phone call, hey, we want to do one more interview. They're doing a grand opening at the new factory in Bainbridge, Georgia. The whole board will be there, and this will be kind of the last step. They didn't say, like, they're going to interview you and the other people. They left it very open and just said, this will probably be the last interview, and then they'll make a decision. And so, I'm thinking, all right, that's fine. I'll, yet again take some vacation and go do this. And, the whole time, like, I had to keep that a secret from Walter, like, which I hate.
Yeah.
But, like, you can't. I couldn't even let people know that I was interviewing, that Taurus was hiring a CEO. So there was a guy that worked there. Like, it was very, very confidential.
Was he stepping down, or was it different?
Yeah, he kind of semi-retired.
Okay,
yeah.
So he knew you were coming, or someone was coming.
He at some point, yes, he did. But like the company didn't know, and I knew people that worked at Taurus. Like, that's kind of where I'm going with this next bit. But like, I knew people that worked there. None of them knew that I was doing any of this.
Interesting.
So I go to Bainbridge I fly to Tallahassee. I stay the night in Tallahassee. I drive up at like 6 a.m. And they set up at this like brand new Hampton Inn that was built basically to support Taurus in Bainbridge. And they're like, yeah, we'll bring you in through the lobby and do an interview. Just be very discreet when you come in, because there's people staying here that are for the grand opening, which means our customers, like everybody that I know is staying at this hotel. And so I pull up, I get in my parking spot or whatever, turn the car off, and I go to get out, and one of our employees who's still with us, a director of sales, Sherry Fix, is at the car next to me getting something out of the back of her car. So I'm just like sitting there waiting for her, like trying to not make eye contact.
Awkward.
And so it's just kind of how the thing went. And they kind of like ushered me in the side door, did like an hour interview with the board, kind of final thing. And then that night I got a call that they were going to offer me the job.
Nice.
And then even then, by the time I got an actual contract signed, was another month and a half, something like that.
When did you know that you wanted the job?
Like for sure after.
Like, I want this.
After the November trip to Brazil.
Okay.
like I was motivated to keep going after the first couple interviews, meeting the team, because I didn't know what I was getting into before I met them. Like, if this is just going to be a thing where I'm like the whipping boy, I'm not interested,
Right.
you know. But when I got to kind of meet these people and learn their personalities and stuff, I'm like, all right, I can work with them. They're fun. Like, they truly seem like they want the U.S. business to lead this thing. And they still, to this day, like, they tell people, even in their, stock shareholder meetings, we're a U.S. company with a Brazilian factory.
Okay.
Even though they're traded down there, they are solely focused on the U.S. market.
So you get the job offer a month and a half later.
Yep.
Any back and forth on that, or did you take it, accept it?
There was a little bit of back and forth. I wasn't. I was pretty excited to get it.
Okay.
Like, yeah. So
When did you tell Walther?
So word got out, and I don't know how, but word got out to one of Walther's sales reps that someone from Walther was going to take over at Taurus. And that sales rep called somebody at Walther's sister company, Umarex, and said, hey, have you heard anything about this job at Taurus? Do you know who that could be? And he goes, the only person I can think of is Bret. And so, like, I remember this. I was flying back to Portland with my family on Christmas Eve. I got a text from the CEO of Walther, said, hey, I know, let's talk next week, whatever, but you need to call the Germans tonight.
Fuck.
So, like,
Call the Germans.
And
that's an
Call the
ominous
Germans
construction.
tonight.
and I was very close. I still am very close with those guys in Germany, but like, he's like, you owe it to call them and tell them yourself.
No congrats or any of that stuff?
No, he was like, look, we'll talk later. And he's super good about it. Like, no hard feelings at all. But, trying to enjoy Christmas Eve with my family, and, and that comes across. And then,
Welcome to CEO-ship.
Yeah, I mean, but the one problem was I hadn't signed any contracts at this point.
Okay.
So it was not final.
That's nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I not that I burned a bridge, but I was out the door for sure. But we worked it out really well. I actually stayed on at Walther as long as they wanted me to.
How long was that?
Probably a month and a half after I started at Taurus, and the Brazilians agreed that, hey, you can help them through a transition. We just need you to, So I was working both booths at SHOT Show. Luckily, they were right next to each other.
That's funny.
That is great.
That's
yeah,
entertaining.
Yeah. So,
I'm entertained right now.
Yeah, it was kind of fun to pull off. And at some point, they just, like, all right, we're good. We don't
Get
need
out.
to transition
Well, they're
anymore.
probably happy that you had a decent handover.
I was glad that they let me also because, historically, I think with that company, if someone was going to a competitor, it's like, all right, hey, we get it, no hard feelings, but you cannot come in our building anymore. But for whatever reason, they were a little more gracious with me.
Probably a testament to your character.
Maybe I'm still close with the CEO there too. So
Well, you
it's like-
speak very highly of the company.
Yeah.
Even when we first met at Branded Rock Canyon, like, you speak very highly of Walter.
Yeah,
Walter.
no, I'm super proud of the stuff we did,
Yeah.
and the people that are there today are still doing great things. I think what they did with launching the PDP and getting it to market, like, I started that project. I wrote however many 35 spec sheets for it, but they had to finish up the development and then get it to market, which is kind of the final stretch and not easy to do. So they've done a great job. And I'm happy to see them succeed. They're also not like a direct competitor of ours. They're at a different price point. So
first day on the job at Taurus.
Oh, man. Drinking from a fire hose. It was at SHOT Show. So I got introduced to the team the morning of the first day at SHOT Show. Like, all right, this is yours now.
Out of the turnip truck into the rose garden.
Yeah.
Like, here we go.
The funniest thing about that week, like, it was a wild week. It was busy.
This is 2018?
No, this is 2020.
Okay.
January 2020, right before COVID.
All right.
So, yeah, I stepped in. We had a 1 week overlap with the prior CEO. He was also there. The Brazilians were there, and spent a week with them. I knew all the customers we were meeting with. I knew, there wasn't a whole lot of new stuff that week. It was not in the factory working with the behind the scenes stuff. So, wasn't all that new. But I remember I went to dinner the last night with the Brazilians, and then kind of had a drink with them, and then, before they went up the elevator to their hotel room, they're like, well, good luck. And then COVID hit, and I didn't see them in person for 2 more years, basically.
Oh, wow.
Like, basically, this time last year was the first time I saw them in person since January of 2020. So when they were saying good luck, when they were saying good luck, it was like, hey, it's yours to don't mess it up, basically.
That's a lot all at once.
Yeah. It was interesting.
So what was like the first 90 days as a CEO? Like, did you have a clue what you were doing?
I mean, I had kind of a game plan. I think it kind of went out the window in March of that year.
Why?
Well, so a couple things. So I think what I expected to do was not what needed to get done right away. Mm-hmm. Like, we had a pretty good team. They were very lean. We didn't have enough people, but the people that we had were actually pretty good. So I didn't feel like I needed to go in and clean house and do all that, which I think maybe the early expectation was a little bit of that, but yeah, it wasn't necessary. So didn't do that. But like in mid-February, I started noticing our back order growing and growing and growing. And this was like COVID was around, but we weren't shut down. Like the country was still normal. And so it was like a signal that something was happening. And it was also like, becoming an election year. So there was some political stuff with Trump. And I noticed that we were still like discounting stuff like it was 2018. Like when the market was really tough, and that's generally what happens in the gun world is you do like you go to a distributor show and you're selling guns, buy 5, get 1 free to your dealers. We were running stuff like that with 30,000 units on back order. So I sat down with the team like, why are we doing this? I'm like, well, we had to have. I'm like, no, we don't have to have a show special. If we have a back order, we actually shouldn't do a show special because you're promising a discount and you're probably not going to deliver it. So kind of like noticing the culture and the mindset of the people was the first thing that we really had to change. Noticing an opportunity to not like lose money or not be the lowest of the low price in the market was like an opportunity for us to flip that switch and start moving things in the right direction. And so getting people bought into that, I hadn't had enough time to really affect the product stuff yet, but let's stabilize the sales process, stabilize what we're doing here. And then when COVID hit, it was just game over there. Like you could not make enough guns ever. We were making 10,000 guns a day.
And then the riots kicked off, which found another gear there.
Yep. Yeah, and that basically lasted through last year. Like our back order, I mean, we still have back orders today, but like polymer frames, semi-auto pistols are pretty caught up with everybody. Mm-hmm. But like, yeah, it was wildfire.
What are you most what's the most impactful thing you've accomplished so far at Taurus? Because I don't know if we're allowed to talk about the back order stuff. Like
on the warranty side?
Yeah,
I'll talk about that.
Okay, yeah. So that like I remember we were talking about that out in Colorado.
I mean I put out a letter to the market recognizing that early on. So kind of after I got my feet wet and established and started like working with the team and understanding who we had, I kind of had some time to start looking at things internally. Every time I'd come in my office, like I was down there every week. Monday morning, I'd come in my office, and there'd be a stack of letters from customers who were not happy.
Like handwritten letters?
Handwritten letters, sometimes in cursive. Like, that tells you someone's pissed off when they write it in cursive.
For everyone listening, I'm from Georgia, and their factory is your office is in Bainbridge, Georgia. Yeah. I write in cursive.
Still. It might have been
you.
Might have been you.
Probably was.
So, yeah, like, I'm like, okay, clearly there's something here that I need to look at. And a lot of it was like, let's say 40% of it was like unfounded or just people being, difficult customers to deal with. But there was 60% of it that was very real, and we had to like look at what was going on. And so part of it was like our processes kind of broke down at some point in warranty repair, and that affects the customer service department directly. So if you have a high number of people waiting on guns to get repaired and get back, that means you have a high number of people that are probably calling in several times a day trying to get a hold of an agent. So our phone lines were overwhelmed. You could not get through.
Especially if they write in cursive. You know they're
Yes.
picking up the telephone.
Yes.
They've got time.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Emails,
Yep.
tweets,
Yep.
everything.
So once I started digging into it, I learned when we moved the factory from Miami to Bainbridge, this is not an excuse, it's just reality of what happened. We already had this problem, but we made it 10 times worse because we moved all of the guns into the building and they were not put in order that we received them. So if somebody called in and said, I want to know where my gun is, we'd say, look, we know your gun's here. I don't know which pallet it's on, though. So I can't tell you when we're going to work on it because I don't know when we're going to get to it. We can't go find your gun out of this stack. And it was 22,000 guns roughly.
Wow.
That we had to work through. So massive problem. So at the same time, our phone lines and our customer service, which those people's jobs is already hard enough. They don't deal with happy customers very often. You couldn't get a hold of them. Our phone lines, when you called in, you would be on hold for 50 minutes, and then it would hang up on you. Which if you're already mad.
Oh, especially if you're writing cursive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's a through line here.
So, yeah, had to address those two things. That was, like, the biggest thing, And if we're real about wanting to change our brand's perception, which we were, and I still am today, that is the number one thing that has to be fixed. Because at this point, we're actually making pretty good guns. That change had already happened, but these are all like really old service orders that needed to be closed out.
What was the oldest one?
Oldest one was 2009.
Holy shit.
That's a decade where I come from.
Yeah. There was a couple instances where once we got to the person we had called and the owner of that gun was no longer alive. That was a bad one. And I think that happened twice. And then, just generally people either change their numbers, can't get a hold of them. It was a mess to do.
How long did it take to fix?
About 14 months to like truly be caught up and fixed and be comfortable that it's, it's good. We've had average turnaround time at that point, which is like from the day we receive the gun till we ship it back to the person, was about 22 weeks. But we know that there were some that were way more than that. Some of it was waiting on parts. Well, we never ordered the parts. There was not a system that said, hey, you need this part for warranty repair. So there was a lot of things that had to be established and put into place to actually like fix that long term. Because we could have done the easy thing, just go through each gun and say, hey, we can't fix your gun. We're going to send you a replacement. We could have done that. But
what's interesting about that? So when I was in real estate from 2001 to 2010, and I remember when I started having some success and making money and stuff. And I remember I bought my first expensive pair of binos from Leupold, and that was in 2004. And I remember when I lived in Washington, one of the reticles stripped. I was like, I'm gonna just call them and see how I can fix this because I like the binos. And I called them, like, yeah, send them in. I said, all right, no problem. Sent the binos in. 2 days later, had a brand new pair of binos on my front step. And you know what? I will not use anything other than Leupold binos now because of that.
That's customer service.
I'm serious. I wouldn't use another pair of binos if you gave me everything, just because of that one instance.
Yeah, and so everywhere that I had worked up until this point also had outstanding customer service. Leupold, 100% best in the industry at what they do. Crimson Trace also had a great warranty repair and customer service team. So like I watched the cultures at those companies, and I knew that we did not have that at Taurus. And so, a lot of what I saw from people that were responsible for that, it wasn't that they didn't want to do a good job, but they just never like felt empowered to take care of the customers.
They're scared of money. Like Tim Ferriss has a saying, like, if you can solve a problem for less than $100 or $200, you don't have to ask permission to solve the problem.
Well, and like I'm of the opinion your warranty repair or customer service should not be a profit center.
Yeah.
If you're worried about making money, you're probably not. And you can sell we would sell parts and stuff to people that wanted to buy parts. They didn't necessarily have a broken gun. They needed a new grip or something. We'd sell parts to people, but your main thing is when somebody calls in, take care of them as fast as you can, make sure that they're happy, and that they're going to buy our product again. Like,
So
Evan's a psychopath about customer service. We have more customer service agents at this company than any other position.
Yeah.
It's truly remarkable. Like, it is amazing. That's his. I think customer service and coffee club. Those are his two babies.
So amongst COVID, right, where your volume, there's more requests for guns. People are buying guns like fucking crazy, and riding the ship in the customer service area. When did you find time to innovate and accomplish this?
Hold that up so the camera can see it.
Yeah. So, you said
Disclaimer,
Evan's a
hard wall.
Yep.
Nobody's over there.
Not
There's no
pointing at
There's no
anybody.
producer over there. Gun is clear. Just a rad little pistol.
Yeah, so like you said earlier, Evan's a marketing guy.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily a sales or marketing guy, even though I've been in those roles in my past. I'm not an engineer either.
You're an engineer.
I'm a product guy.
Engineer.
I've learned how to speak to engineers and be able to relate certain concepts to them. But like at the same time, I actually don't do any real work, if that makes sense. Like I micromanage this side more than probably anything. But like our team is expected to own their department and their role and run it, and I'm always available to step in and help, do whatever they need, support them. But like this is probably what I micromanage the most.
Really?
After we kind of got out of the hole with warranty repair and I didn't have to watch that as close, I still get a daily dashboard sent to me that I watch. But like I wasn't like back in the factory every day, or I'm not today like I was. This side of it is something that I micromanage because this is something I am so passionate about, and it's also the lifeblood of our company to really change for not just today. Like I think we've done a good job, but 5-10 years out, what do we look like as a company? Like we have to drive this ship the right way.
Yeah.
And I think our brand more than anybody, we don't have room for error in this. We can't have an overlooked feature or we can't afford to not do it right the very first time.
You need a 100% solution right out of the gate because there's competition in this. There's a lot of
stiff competition.
Yeah.
Their brands are all generally more respected than ours.
I've put my hands on all of them, and this one's got awesome features right out of the gate.
What about this tan thing?
This is a space gun.
Yeah. So that's the G3 tactical model.
Hold it up like that so everybody can see it. That is a cool looking pistol.
Yeah. So this particular one, these are all my personal guns. I carry this GX4.
See, it looks like I'm pointing at your face, but I'm not. I
Hold
swear,
it like this.
I'm not.
Give them a palm up.
Palm up.
Yeah, so they can see it. Yeah, that thing's rad.
You're such a civilian. Fuck off.
Absolutely a civilian.
So this particular gun has grip work done by Boresight Solutions down in Florida. He does great work. On this type of gun, I like it more aggressive than what our factory stippling is. On the carry gun, which this is what I carry. If I'm not carrying a revolver, I carry this gun every day. I want it a little bit, like this is still very effective stippling, but I want it a little bit, I can't hurt my delicate skin as much as I can with
but you also thought ahead and put the thumb,
kind of indexing pads. Yeah, and then for your strong hand, you can rest your trigger finger up there.
Yeah, little touch point.
Yep. So G3 Tactical is kind of our most feature-rich full-size gun. We don't have any GX4s in that size category right now. It's like I'll say the GX4 is our future platform for sure, but the G3 right now is like what we probably sell the most of, G3 in the compact version, and this is like the has everything version of it.
Right.
Yeah. So threaded barrel from the factory, DLC coating on the barrel. Which is not something we had done before the GX4, but very superior coating to really anything out there. And then the tan slide, tan grip.
Can we say Coyote? That's how I like to say it.
Coyote.
And for all the nerds like me, yes, everything's co-witnessed with the red dot, suppressor sight, heights, all the whiz-bang things, and the triggers are flat, not triangular.
That's right.
Big fan.
Yeah, and like so those little details I think are super important. I'm a trigger snob. I was when I was at Walther. Really spoiled with the triggers that they had. So like that's one of the things I'm going to focus the most on. It has to be the right trigger. Of course, the drop safety, all that stuff has to be sound. We test all of that. But like the trigger, I want a shorter take up. I want a crisp break. This is a carry gun. It's about a 6-pound trigger. When we do a full version of that, the trigger will be longer, so you'll have more leverage on it, and it'll feel a little bit lighter. It'll be the exact same trigger. So really cool features on it.
Well, the way it handles too. So I rocked an M&P when it kind of first came out.
Yep.
For a long time. Still have one in the safe or two, but the grip feels as narrow. So I expected a 7 or 8+1, but we're at 11+1 on this bad boy.
Yeah, and that one has the extended base pad, so it's actually 13 plus 1.
Doesn't feel like it. The grip doesn't match the capacity that you're rocking, so that's pretty rad.
So what's next? What should people be looking for from Taurus?
Man, I think we're kind of poised to start moving into some new directions that I think are really fun. I think we've talked a lot. I'm a very passionate hunter. We don't play a lot in that space. I think we can do some innovative things that would really be groundbreaking. I don't necessarily want to be a price point bolt action type of company. I go to toe with Savage. That's not something I think we would do well or have any interest in doing. But I think we can do some pretty interesting things in that space. We already do some long guns, do really well with them, with lever action, stuff like that. But I think it's time to kind of move into that space.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
That's the world that I play in. Like, you guys talk tactics and pistols all you want, but the hunting stuff gets me really worked up.
Yeah, but do me a favor. Like, I have a small branch of me, and that's the T&E department. Don't send anything to Baker.
No.
Okay, send it all to me.
I'll take your word on it. Yeah, this is good. Okay, fine, works for me. That's exciting, man. So, Bret, where can people find you, or Taurus? Where can they find Taurus?
Yeah, Taurus USA on Instagram, Facebook,
Twitter.
I don't know if we're on Twitter. I think we are on Twitter.
Yes, you have a Twitter account.
Not my department.
There you go.
No, and then TaurusUSA.com. Our other brands, HeritageManufacturing.com, Rossi USA. Really wide product lines with a lot of different stuff. So a lot of exciting things happening there.
That's cool, man. Well, listen, dude, we appreciate you coming on.
Yeah,
awesome,
thank
man.
you.
We
Thank you
enjoyed
for the great
chat.
coffee and good chat. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you.
That concludes today's training. Any questions? Woo! Drum titties, boy!